I say we get this thing kicked off, and as others join, I'm sure that they'll be able to kind of catch up to speed. I guess to kind of start, I'd just like to welcome everybody. My name is Shawn Brown. I'm president of Snaptech IT. And as Karl mentioned earlier, I am out of our Atlanta office. And I am joined with my good buddy, Mr. Karl Bickmore. Why don't you kind of introduce yourself as well?
Yes, Karl Bickmore, CEO of Snaptech IT. I know many of the people that signed up for this webinar are longtime customers, and many I would also call friends. So welcome, thank you for joining. And so this is for those that know me here in Arizona and the customers from Arizona. Now they're getting to see the other half here if they haven't met you before, one of my partners in the business here. And so thanks, Shawn, for joining us. And I also know some of them that are joining are folks that know you and have never met me before.
That's right.
But Shawn and I have been doing this together since 2016, and actually we've been good friends and known each other since 2010. And so this has been kind of a fun experiment, and it's exciting to get this together and to begin really sharing some important sort of updated information. When we speak to new customers or folks joining, we'll bring these type of technologies up at the very beginning of the conversation, but many of the people in this webinar have been a customer for a long time. And we may have mentioned things about MDR or managed detector response or other things around cybersecurity, but we just felt that the word wasn't getting out well enough. And so we thought maybe this would be a more convenient way to share why we're bringing this up, and why we think it's important for everybody to look to engage in this type of endpoint security, this type of threat protection. And so I'm really looking forward to the conversation, but we'll keep it quick and hopefully you find it informative. And once again, since many of you are our existing customers, we'll want to know any feedback that you have for us. And then those that aren't, feel free to reach out with further questions as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks for that. Well, like Karl said, thanks for joining us today. We got some really cool content today. We're going to dig in and go under the cover a little bit and check out some, the flux capacitor and get a little nerdy, a little technical. But as always, one of the things I think Karl and I do really well is take really complex technical problems and boil them down into non-geek speak so that everybody can kind of comprehend and understand hopefully what we're kind of talking about. So what we're going to talk about today, and we're going to dive into this real world scenario for one of our clients that we were onboarding. They were in the food service industry, and in the midst of onboarding them, we kind of discovered that there was an active attacker in the environment and an active attack going on in the environment. And so we're going to go through their environment and some of the challenges that they had in their environment, how the attack was detected, what the response kind of looked like, some of the steps that we took to kind of secure the environment. And with that, let's jump right in. So, and then we'll have time at the end for any kind of questions. So if you got questions, you can post them there, and we will do our best to get those answered for you. So a little bit, if you don't mind, I'll kind of kick this off and just kind of talk a little bit about this, the client that we were kind of talking about. They were in the food service industries here in the Southeast. They came to us, we kind of followed our proven process of doing an initial assessment in the environment. We discovered, multiple security challenges that were going on, lack of best practices, and identified a couple of high priority projects. So just kind of an idea of what some of those, they didn't have any kind of SIM tool in place, which allows you to kind of document and collect log data. There was no advanced kind of antivirus, anti-ransomware. They didn't have anything like that deployed. They were not enforcing any kind of secure password policy at the time. They had about 500 accounts in their Active Directory. So Active Directory is kind of the system that controls username and passwords. So they had about 500 accounts with the password set to never expire. They had a lot of unsupported operating system in the environment. They were running some Windows 2003 servers that were running some line of business applications and some custom code. I believe they also had still a number of Windows 7 devices in their environment. They were in the midst of moving from an on-premise Exchange server, so that's kind of Microsoft's kind of mail server. I think most of everybody now has probably already moved to Office 365, but they were in the middle of doing that. They had no 2FA set up on their Office 365. Very non-existent web filtering going on their internal firewall. In fact, their firewall was actually old and didn't have the capability to do some of the newer kind of protections, which ended up being a major problem for us during this attack.
Yeah, and trying to fix it. Yeah.
Yeah, like for example, they weren't able to do any kind of like country blocking. Lots of just really unmanaged data in their Active Directory. And again, Active Directory is a solution or a system that you probably all have in your environments. You may not know that you do, but you do. And it controls the usernames, the passwords, computer accounts, some security settings that we can kind of globally push down and some stuff like that. And one of the big things that they had in their environment was most of their users were local administrators on their account, on their workstations, meaning they had the ability to install software kind of at will and do anything that they kind of wanted to on the local machine. So,
and I'd like to point this out for customers that we work with is by default and has been for a long time the standard to not have every user logging in. Even administrators don't log in with administrative authority. You only use administrative accounts and they're separate accounts when you need to do an administrative thing like install a printer, set up an application, whatnot. And aside from the security risk, because when people have local administrators, they become compromised. Now that attacker can do anything on that computer and can easily try to spread laterally to other computers. And so when you have an issue, it's really hard to contain, but it's also way more likely you get an issue when people can click and install anything and grab any little add-on to their software thinking they're grabbing the right thing. But even aside from the security thing, it causes a little bit of chaos just in your IT in general if everybody's kind of doing a little bit of their own IT while you're also having somebody like us or somebody that's in your IT team trying to keep things stable and reliable and consistent when kind of everybody's doing a little bit of their own thing. So it's a bad practice from a management standpoint. It's a very bad practice from a security standpoint.
Yeah. So Karl, why don't you just touch real quick on kind of I kind of moved to a different slide, but just talk real quick about the importance of kind of following kind of our proven process and the steps.
Well, yeah, you bet. I mean, here's the thing. For a lot of folks here, you've been our customer for a long time. Hi, good to see you. Thank you. We appreciate you. But there have been things that we have added to our offering in the last couple of years that we think you really should consider. And if anybody's looking for new IT, this should be the approach. For many years, we've done our best to protect you and our best to do all the things we can, and all of that really still applies. We've always wanted to put out the best firewalls and have the right restrictions and have the country code blocking and have the intrusion prevention systems running. And we've always recommended good password policies. We recommend multi-factor authentication. This is our proven process. A couple of things that are new is that there's new threat protection technology out there. And so many of our customers are already on board. Some of the people that signed up for this webinar are already using our MDR or our Managed Detect and Response system and the Security Information Monitoring, or SIM, as it's called in the industry, SIEM. Many of them our customers are using it, but we still have many that have been longtime customers that have not adopted into the new technology. And this is really our time to say, you really need to consider this. The world has changed fundamentally. The key thing about this attack that we're talking about is that attacker had been there since April, and it was October when it had happened, when we got on board and found it. And the reality of it is we're well into our onboarding. We'd already rolled out some of the best antivirus software out there. But the way that they had entered, which has become the new way to enter through things like social engineering, password guessing, through exploits, the way they'd gotten in, they didn't trigger even the best antivirus in the world as an attacker. They looked to the antivirus like an IT person doing IT things. In fact, it's very hard for anything to detect when they enter like they're an employee doing IT things for you. And so that's where these other newer technologies come in. We really are asking all of our customers to look at two things: the webinar we're talking about today, the Managed Detect and Response tool, and our proven practice, as well as the one we're bringing on in June. And I hope all of you join and get other people involved as well around application control, because these are the new techniques to combat the new techniques of the types of attacks that are coming. And they are not in your system if you're not taking advantage of the MDR or the application. You do not have a good defense against it. As much as we're here to protect, we may be disabled without the right tool set. And then once again, some of you are, and some of you have one and not the other. And so this is about us educating you. Our proven practice works very well, but you can't have missing pieces in order for it to be fully effective. And that's one of the things we just have to make sure you understand. But all of these pieces are pieces that if you met me, like I know at least one person that signed up for this webinar has been a customer since, I'm going to say 2007, 2008. Another person that signed up is actually the first customer I ever worked with, January of 2000. And that was before I was in SnapTech. It was my side gig. I worked as an IT guy and I was helping them out on the side. And so many of you I've known for many years, and you've seen how this has evolved. And this is our message to you. You need to do more if you have not yet engaged and asked how these work, because this proven process works. And we need our existing long-term customers to come up to speed with what we're now putting out there for any customer we're talking with. And there is some extra cost involved, but it's something that I would argue is well worth it, just like we spend on backup, just like we spend on good firewalls and good endpoint protection. This Managed Detect and Response, the security information event monitoring solutions, the advanced threat protection, turning on multi-factor authentication. These are things that have now become, in our minds, the bare minimum. And in fact, many of you are getting insurance renewals now that are asking, do you have MDR or EDR, another similar product to it, in place? And they won't, they'll either up your rate or they won't insure you for cybersecurity insurance anymore if you don't have something like this in place. It's not just us that has recognized that this is the new way to defend. You know.
All right, I'm going to throw you a quick curveball, but I'm only going to give you 2 minutes because I know, believe it or not, Karl can go on for a little bit. I don't know if anybody's ever noticed that or not, but I'm going to give you 2 minutes. Give me the analogy of just detect technology that we always talk about as it relates to security cameras and how we secure an office building.
Okay, I'll do it real quick. This is how Managed Detect and Response, MDR, is different than traditional antivirus, traditional firewall, traditional methods of security that we've done for years, that if you're working with us, you already have in place. The existing antivirus that we have in place is like locking your door. It's good protection. It's like, maybe even we're putting 2 locks in or 3 because we're doing a really great job. But the problem is, if somebody can unlock that door and walk right through, if you don't have something to detect an improper person just walk through your door, like an alarm system, you have no ability to know what's going on inside your network. And that's the fundamental difference between just traditional endpoint protection and security that we've used for many years for protecting and locking doors, and what we get out of a threat detection system like Managed Detection and Response does. And so when we're putting the MDR in place, we then are able to compare it against threat intelligence and say, hey, this person just entered the door. Are they somebody who's actually supposed to be there? Or is this at a weird time of day? Or did they just transfer a bunch of files to someplace in China? That seems unusual. There's all sorts of behavioral things can be used to identify if somebody should be triggering the alarm system. So traditional protection is like locking your door, and the threat detection of Managed Detect and Response is like an alarm system that will check to see if whoever's wandering around in your office or your home is actually somebody who should be there. And that the last part of the analogy is if you're using a logging collection tool like a SIM that comes with the MDR offering that we put together, then it's also like having a camera system in your building that will record what happened. It's logs that tells you who went where and when, which are very important to figure out if you need to go back and find out when something started, when they made it, and where they went, what they did. That's what that's about. So traditionally, you've had good door locks with us, but until you come on to MDR, you do not have the alarm system, you don't have the camera system, not in an effective way.
Perfect. That was great. Speaking of our proven process, we had a slide here for it, but I'm going to just move us through this real quick because I want to get down into the technical bolts of this this attack that we went through. So,
yeah, you bet. I mean, this is just an example. That's a slide we show customers that are new. Those of you who've been customers for a long time, we hadn't written it down yet, but that's the process. We assess, plan.
Yeah, related to some of that proven process. So let's get into the technical details and talk about really what kind of happened. So this was a situation where I don't want to pick on marketing people, but this was a person in the marketing department that got tricked by a phishing email. And whenever they got tricked by the phishing email, they downloaded a piece of software and installed a what's called a command and control piece of software on the user's machine. This screenshot that you're looking at, and maybe Karl, you want to jump in and kind of explain what we're kind of looking at here?
Yeah, I mean, basically, this is just evidence is showing like, hey, this user that's just got created with this command has no password expiration, no controls. Password has never been reset. It had been in place since 2007. That account hadn't logged in since 2019. And it had all sorts of not only administrative access to that local computer, but also to the servers and the entire network. And so it's just been sitting there waiting to be exploited. And then once they gain control of it, nobody's actually actively using it. So nobody even noticed that there's weird things going on with their accounts until we just happen to get it and see it. And I think the real message here is like, look, when we came across this, it actually was one of our engineers actively doing something on a server that saw it happen. It's like, that's weird behavior. And he dug in. We had not yet installed our MDR solution. But here's the message. As soon as we saw it, we're like, holy smokes, this is an actual active attack. We need to jump into action. We called our vendor for MDR services. They overnighted a sensor appliance to us. We deployed it. And the big message is that the moment we installed it, it immediately told us everywhere that this attacker was functioning. It was immediately able to zero in on this command and control and this spreading activity, which was very important. But it just showed me, had we had that in place before, we would have caught it much, much earlier. And frankly, they had it happening before they even met us. It had been there that long. We found evidence that it had been there for 6 months, and they've been silently gathering credit card information and other data without the customer's knowledge.
Yeah. So just the takeaway here, every user was a local admin on the machine. That's how they were able to install the software. And then let's take a look at what we kind of found during this attack.
Yeah, this is a snapshot of the activity where we started to see that there was port scanning going on. We started capturing logs from various things. We saw that it expanding and moving throughout the network, and we would go and try to kill it from one location and see it pop up at another. Then we'd have somebody VPN into the network that had it on that hadn't been there when we cleaned it out last time. It's quite the effort to clear an active attack that had essentially spread across hundreds of systems. It was quite the event and some very long days and nights. And this is just an example of a screenshot showing the spikes in activity.
Yeah, specifically what we noticed was that there were some very odd service accounts that kept showing up with failed logins. That was our initial clue that was what was going on. And then one of our internal administrators who had a domain admin credentials noticed that his had its own failed logins. And he was like, that's really weird. I haven't been logging in and having failed logins, but they were trying to use his account to do it. what we ended up also discovering, and I think there's a slide here in a second, was that they were able to use some software to actually steal other domain accounts and start leveraging other accounts to traverse through the network.
Yeah. So a very common attack in Windows systems.
Yeah. Again, just another kind of nerdy screenshot of some of the data that's that we were able to see through that solution. So tell us a little bit about lateral movement and what that actually means as it relates to a computer network.
Sure. Well, so lateral movement, sometimes when an attacker gets into your network, all they can do is attack the system that they happen to land on. Maybe it was a remote desktop server or a file server or something like that. But usually their goal is once they get into one place, they begin to try to move to all the other systems in your network that are connected so that they can spread their attack and get as many hands on as many systems as possible. You know, this can either lead to a ransomware event where they encrypt them all and then demand ransom, or it can lead to stealing data and information, which was more the operation that was going on at this particular customer. And so they're executing normal IT looking commands to start things on other computers to then bring their program down and give them command and control activity on all systems. And so once again, we're noticing unusual system files, unusual drivers. This Mimikatz thing also, by the way, that they were using it's kind of a known thing. You know, people who name nerdy stuff name them weird things, Mimikatz, but it is essentially a type of password attack that basically preys on low complexity passwords. If a password is under a certain amount of characters and under a certain amount of complexity, if they can get into the network and start looking at traffic in the network, they can grab those passwords fairly easily. This is just a note. You have to have good passwords to prevent some of these really easy low-level attacks that can happen once they make their way in.
Yeah, specifically with this one, and I don't know if everybody realizes this or not, but you can leverage that Mimikatz software to basically go in and pull a password, add a hash from any domain server that you want. It's pretty easy if you have the right administrative kind of access to an environment to just log in and basically steal a password that had been cached after it had been used to log in. Unfortunately, it's a hole really in Windows security, but that's essentially what they were doing here, was leveraging these tools internally and just stealing domain passwords. Like our engineer kept changing his password, and then they kept finding it and reusing it and logging in as him again.
Yeah, which is one of the reasons why we never use the same password anywhere at any client or any place, because of, you know, if it ever became compromised. But the key thing here is if you don't have good password policies, or just note that if somebody finds their way into your network, no antivirus software will stop this program from running. It looks like regular IT activity to it. And so that's where the threat detection element of this happens. It says, hey, why is something running this? Because it seems really odd. And so let's take a look at that and go look at the logs and see what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that's a really traditional endpoint protection and managed detection and response, or MDR, is it can look at that activity that an antivirus program, even the best antivirus program, won't catch.
All right. So attack response and resolution.
Yeah. So
what do we take to kind of resolve this? So we got this attacker in the network. He's stealing passwords, or they're stealing passwords. They're laterally moving through the environment. I don't know if there's a spot. I can't remember. Essentially, one of the things that they were also able to do was they moved kind of laterally through the network. They were able to gain access to a certain user's computer that was logging into some of their restaurants. They used screen capture technology to steal this guy's username and password, and then they were able to go access the restaurants and start stealing credit card data out of those environments. And so this is, you know, a good example of someone that got access into the network from the again, I'll pick on the marketing people, and then was able to kind of spread across and go steal some credit card data.
Right. Yeah, I mean, and this is the truth is they get in and they're typically looking around, poking around and spreading. And with the right utility, you can stop them before they actually do anything. And that's the real message. There's a thing called dwell time. But how do we respond? Well, here at SnapTech IT, this is like one of the main things that people want us to be there for, is to make sure that if there's a problem, you got a good professional response. We rely on ourselves, but we also can bring in experts. The whole process is we have a formal incident response plan that we actually do what are called tabletop exercises, where we bring our people into a room and we put up a scenario of a customer or somebody having an issue, and we practice how to respond, because that typically is the best way to get the right kind of response, because a lot of people make mistakes when the pressure gets high and when it looks like there's something happening that looks like an attack. So we have a formal incident response process that we followed. We hold meetings with the right people. We consult. We have the customers consulting with the right experts on their end around their insurance and their attorneys, because those can become important parts of the stages of how you communicate. And if an attorney is involved, then the conversation becomes privileged, and so it doesn't have to be shared later in other ways. And then we began the process of containment, which is the lockdown, the firewalls. We began running scripts on affected servers to remove the things that are happening, began to block ways that they were transferring laterally, and disabling the admin shares that were also allowing, you don't know this, but every Windows machine has shares on it that are hidden, that are ways that IT people can use to do things on a computer, like 40 computers all at once, but which they were actually taking to their advantage. So we disabled things. That was all in the containment on the initial steps.
Yeah, one of the big things that I remember from this attack too is they had some older firewalls in place, and we had not yet put in the Sophos firewalls that we deploy, in our client environments. And because of that, we weren't able to limit the incoming and outbound, traffic using things like country blocking. We could see exactly where it was going, but we couldn't do anything about it with that old technology in place. So it wasn't until we started getting, the Sophos firewalls in place where we were able to kind of block that. But that was one of the things that we did as we were kind of combating this active attack.
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think a key thing to remember is that, this isn't specifically throwing shade on Cisco, but they had a very old type of Cisco firewall that didn't support some of these newer ways of doing some of these things. And by newer, I mean 10 years ago new, kind of thing. They were very outdated. Or the other thing we find a lot of times when we engage with new customers is that they have a firewall in place that's entirely capable of it, but for whatever reason, it was never configured to do those kind of security things. And so it's not just that you have the right solution, that's managed correctly and against a good standard. And so, yeah, the firewall was an important piece, because we, as a rush, began, we accelerated the firewall deployment. We accelerated the MDR tool deployment as well, so we can get better information where it's happening, and we could start to meaningfully block this traffic as part of the containment to keep them out, because they were actively coming back in and around us as we were starting to shove them out the door.
Yeah, it was pretty interesting. It was like playing chess in a computer system. We'd make a move, they'd make a move.
I have all sorts of geeky, nerdy references. I mean, if everybody can remember Hack the Gibson from Hackers, that's what,
you just want more nerdy than me. I already know what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's too nerdy.
So how about this? Managing an infected environment. It's tough. Like I said, I mean, we were making moves, they were making moves. Why don't you talk a little bit, just real quick, about some of the other things we did to kind of lock them down?
Yeah, look, there's vulnerabilities in outdated softwares that can't just be patched. There was a lot of effort. This particular client had hundreds of systems involved that really made the effort a bigger effort than even a smaller company. But either way, this was several very, very long days for many, many people as we're just trying to gain ground against it. This is the scenario. I feel like in the long run, we did a really great job. It's just when this stuff happens, it's very difficult. It's very interruptive, and there's a lot of risk and a lot of stress involved. But they had out-of-date workstations that were not running the newest operating systems. So we had to fix that. We had to get Windows 10 machines that are in place, segmented out. So we started building our safe zone using the firewalls and the new machines. And then we got all over the firewalls. It says in this replace PICs and ASA equipment. Those are old Cisco firewalls. Cisco has great threat detection and things like that available. Usually it's actually pretty expensive and meant for bigger companies, even bigger than this company. But we're very happy with the Sophos solution that we work with because we feel like it fits our client base very well and has excellent security. But I don't want you to get the message here that we're trying to throw shade on Cisco. Cisco's excellent. It's just they had very old, out-of-date versions of it, and it was not configured well. So
that's right. That's right. Yeah, fantastic. And then, so you listen to Karl and I talk a little bit about this kind of whole MDR and this active attack that we went through. I've got questions up. If anybody has any, questions, feel free to ask them now, and I can kind of try to moderate and kick us some questions out if anybody's got any. If not, we can continue to kind of roll through this, and I'll just kind of monitor this question section here for us, Karl. Any kind of parting comments that you want to kind of kick out as we maybe wait on some questions to come in?
Yeah, I do have a couple of things. One is, look, most people here are good customers, good partners that we very much appreciate doing business with. Many of you are long-term customers, and that's why we need to get the word out. We're trying to find the most effective way, so please let us know if you find this to be a valuable way to educate you. This is not about telling you what you have to do. We want you to see the light. We want you to see the benefit and the reason that we're making these recommendations. And you know what? There's probably like 17 things I would like all of you to do from a security standpoint, but we feel like we really have to draw the line on this MDR and this upcoming application control webinar that we're going to talk about next month as well, because both of these technologies are in use in many of our customers, but we still have many long-term customers that have not taken advantage of these. And I would imagine it's mostly because there's concern around what the costs are. And look, we can let us know. We can tell you exactly what it costs for your organization. And I highly recommend you consider it, because they're just types of attacks that are now become the prevalent types of attacks that we cannot defend against until you have these tools. And that's our concern. We are ultimately your expert. You ask us to tell you about upcoming technology. We're here to be your eye into what you should be doing for your IT and technology. And I'm sure all of you want to keep your data and your network secure and not to have one of those crazy experiences. And you probably even know people that have, or can remember times in your past when it's happened to your organization. That's what we're trying to prevent. And an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, as they say. And so we highly encourage you to consider it. Let us know. Talk to your account manager. Many of you are talking to Nicole or to Sabina or myself or Shawn. Let us know what you'd like to know more about this, because in my mind, if you're not already using it, you really should be considering it.
Excellent. Well, we must have done an amazing job, because I don't have any questions coming in.
Or they all fell asleep.
So. Yeah, or we just went way too nerdy on them. Well, thank you everybody for taking 30-35 minutes of your day and spending a little time with us. Like Karl said, we feel like our job is to help just kind of educate you and help you understand the risks that are out there and how to better mitigate risk in your environment. So I've got the slide up. So the June webinar is will be right around the corner. Look for emails or registration links that'll come out on our website here probably in the next couple of days for the June event. And if you have any questions, if you're like me, as soon as you hang up from this, you're going to go, oh, I wish I'd asked that. Just shoot us an email, let us know, and we'll be happy to answer any of your questions that you may have. So
I'll give a little bit of a teaser to the June webinar. Remember my analogy about locking the door from a protection, but a web camera helps you detect protection, detection being two different things. The the June webinar is about a new type of protection, a better way of locking the door. You'll still need the detection we're talking about today, but it's a better door. It's more like a safe lock at a bank than it is, than, you know, 3 or 4 deadbolts on your door. It's the new robust way to put protection into your environment. And so it comes with its, you know, set of things that you have to be prepared for and understand. But we have seen immensely beneficial results on the security front using this new technology. So we're excited to talk about it. We've been using it ourselves for a couple of years, and we have several customers using it as well. We're excited to make sure all of you understand that as well.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everybody for spending a couple minutes with us today. We greatly appreciate you and being a partner of ours. So until next month, we'll see you soon. Thanks, everybody.